Peter Kafka is senior editor for media at Recode, the digital news platform launched by Kara Swisher and Walt Mossberg. Peter's been covering media and technology since 1997 for Forbes, Forbes.com, and the brand that has become Business Insider. He's the host of the Recode Media with Peter Kafka podcast, which is terrific, by the way. I strongly recommend it. And the producer of the annual Code Media Conference, which is the one well, it's not the one we're talking about,
That's
right?
in February.
That's the February
See you
one.
then.
Please welcome Peter Kafka.
Thanks.
Peter, you're just back from Code. Mary Meeker did her kind of annual State of the State.
Yep.
The Kleiner Perkins presentation.
Go get it online. It's free.
It's online, it's free, and it's many, many slides, but it's very worthwhile. And I wondered, on the basis of that, State of the State is, here's where kind of the state of technology is now compared to a year ago, and here's where it's going, and here's our projection, our assessment. Without going into all the details of that, what surprised you about that?
That is a good trick question because I haven't spent as much time with that slide as I should because I was on stage most of the time. I mean, the thing that people are always drawn by, and this is a yearly thing, it's not a surprise, but people always remark on it, is Mary will always have a slide that shows we're spending this much time on digital platforms, video, podcast, whatever it is. Ad dollars are still being spent over in traditional media, are still being spent on print. There's a huge gap. And this is the premise of pretty much anyone investing time and or money in digital media is, well, the ad dollars are going to show up on the digital platforms eventually. They've been saying that for a decade, now 2 decades. And it is moving very, very, very slowly. I think Howard just said the projection for podcasting is $36 million bucks next year. I mean, it takes a long time to move the ad dollars. The eyeballs always move ahead. So that can be frustrating if you're in the digital platform business, but it's also a huge opportunity. And that's the thing, that the one slide everyone remarks on year after year.
The fact that that is there every year, year after year, leads me to wonder, is that an assumption on her part? I mean, we say, well, because usage is here and ad dollars are here, invariably, ad dollars will reach usage. Is that necessarily true?
I don't think it's ever going to equal out. I think just because there's a ton of people watching digital video doesn't mean that every dollar is going to move over from TV. And by the way, the old platforms aren't going away for a long time. That said, there's just still an enormous amount of opportunity. So even if a little bit moves over, a lot of folks are going to do well.
Okay. The biggest gap, as I recall, is in mobile. It always seems to be in mobile, right?
Mobile, yep.
Between usage and ad dollars.
And digital video. I mean, you hear a lot of talk about, well, there's going to be a flight of money moving over from TV to video. It's not happening yet.
On mobile in particular, it's complicated by the fact that, you know, the real estate is proportionately different. And I wonder what your attitude is about, you know, what the mechanism is that's going to make that gap decrease. I mean, here in the audio space, we could say, well, audio is, you know, a natural complement to mobile because it requires no real estate.
Yeah, I mean, no one has really figured it out. The 2 companies that own almost all mobile advertising are Facebook and Google. Facebook stumbled into it, right? They don't really want to present it this way, but they remember when they went public just a few years ago, I think it was 4 years ago, they didn't have a mobile advertising plan. They had literally no money for mobile. Everyone sort of realized that and freaked out. And what turned things around for them are this really kind of clunky ad called a mobile app install ad. These are ads for Clash of Clans and what's the other one? Anyway, you guys all know what these ads are. And that has been powering their business. Facebook would like Toyota and all the folks who sell stuff on TV to figure out some way of putting their ads on Facebook, but they're not doing it yet. So again, there's this big gap between what Facebook would like to have and where they are now. That said, they're still generating billions of dollars, so they're okay in the meantime.
What do you think is going to close that? I mean, what's the trigger going to be? What's going to change that gap?
I don't know. I would love to know. If I knew, I would probably not be sitting here. I'd be sitting on a big pile of cash myself.
I was going to say, I won't take that personally. You know, because of your podcast, because of all your writing, all your work, you know, obviously media is exploding. Brands, even consumers, are media today.
Yeah.
Something Andy Bowers said to me out there was, in the future, everyone's going to have a podcast for 15 minutes.
Yep.
Everyone's a media maker. Some have argued that we've reached peak TV. What do you think we've reached peak media?
We might. I mean, you could have said that 10 years ago about blogging, right? Everyone was a blogger for 10 or 15 minutes until they realized no one was reading their blog. it's very depressing to create content that no one's going to consume. And I think everyone who's jumping into blogging is going to figure that out pretty quickly because there's only a handful of things that are going to get consumed. As a consumer, it's great. This is the best time ever to consume media. For certain kinds of media creators, it's great because there's a lot of opportunity. You can do things for very low cost that are very effective and engaging. There's also a lot of dumb money sloshing around right now. I mean, anyone can sell a video show to Verizon. If you guys have any idea for any kind of video, go to Verizon right now. They will buy it from you. They're just pouring money into this stuff because they don't know what works and they don't know how to do it. And eventually they're either going to figure it out or stop doing it. But right now there is a boomlet for, again, video, I think probably for audio as well.
That's interesting you say that because I've wondered about that relative to a lot of the over-the-top stuff, over-the-top video stuff, whether these are just, is it dumb money? Is it smart experiments? Is it just toe in the water? What are these things?
All of the above, right? So Netflix didn't have original content a couple years ago. Now they're spending billions of dollars on it. They're here for real. Amazon is getting into it, spending billions of dollars, but they're really still sort of toe in the water. I mean, they're doing Woody Allen projects, and Woody Allen literally has no idea what he's making for them. They're spending $300 million on Top Gear, and they're just sloshing money around. But Jeff Bezos is a very serious guy. He's going to figure it out. I don't know that Verizon is going to be in this business in a couple of years ago if they can't figure it out. But for now, they spent $4 billion on AOL. They're going to spend another $4-6 billion on Yahoo. They think there's a thing out there that they're going to figure out. So they're going to pour a lot of money into this for a while.
How do you see the Yahoo story? What do you see as the next chapter of the Yahoo story? And don't tell me if you knew it, you'd be sitting on a big pile of money.
No, I think Verizon buys Yahoo. I think it's that boring and unexciting in the end. And I think they combine it with AOL, which they've been talking about doing for years, and they end up having one big platform that slowly goes away.
that sounds like a great deal.
Yeah, no, they're old. No one has ever turned around a consumer-facing internet business. Once consumers decide they don't want to go to this website anymore, they stop going, or they go there habitually, or because they don't know how to like change the browser. But no one has ever taken a declining internet brand, the consumer-facing internet brand, Priceline's sort of an exception, and gotten people to re-engage with it. And I don't imagine that AOL didn't do that, and Yahoo's been trying to do it for years. There's no sense that they're going to be able to pull that off.
What has surprised you? You've been covering media now for years. What has surprised you most in that time?
I don't think we saw Facebook coming. We saw it coming, and we took it as we thought that was a joke. And remember when we were throwing sheep? When you use Facebook, and they were poking, and it was something college kids used, and it sort of crept up while we weren't taking it seriously, and now has eaten the world. And that's a good lesson, I think, for people like me to sort of pay more attention, be more mindful to the stuff that is growing sort of right in front of your eyes, even as you're not paying attention to it. I think everyone now has learned that lesson to some degree with Snapchat, so they're paying an overwhelming amount of attention to that, which again didn't exist a couple of years ago. Now people are paying enormous attention to the rise of that company.
Do you think people are paying too much attention to Snapchat?
It's a good question. There's definitely a sense that we think it's a hot club. All the kids are in the hot club. All the old people like me literally can't even understand where the club is, where the door is, how to make the thing work. So that makes it more enticing. And again, if you're an advertiser, of course you want to throw money at that thing. I was just talking to one of the investors in Snapchat, they just raised $1.8 billion. We no longer that's no longer a big deal. Because the same day they announced that, Uber raised $3.5 billion. These numbers are crazy. But he said, well, no, that what has to happen for his investment to work is Snapchat has to grow 3x from where it is today. Mm-hmm. It's hard to imagine that Snapchat is going to grow 3x, which means eventually the old people like me have to show up, and that the kids who are there will want to be there with me.
Want to stay there with me.
Come on. And it's hard to imagine how it'll work, but like we just said, that has worked with Facebook. Facebook has been able to grow at an amazing pace and continue to hold on to its users.
Not so much with Twitter. How do you see that playing out?
Twitter's stuck. So I just interviewed Jack Dorsey, and I tried to get him to say, when are you going to unstick it? And the answer is he doesn't know.
That's not probably the best answer.
And he can't say that out loud. It's a great, awesome platform. I use it probably way too much. I think it's got 300 million people on it. It's a big platform. I think their mistake was a number of years ago, they said, we are going to be as big as Facebook. and they've got an ad business that's built on that premise. They've got a Wall Street valuation that's built on that premise, and they're never going to be able to fulfill that. So I think at some point they're going to have to accept they're a smaller company and a vital one, but live with that.
Why did Recode launch a series of podcasts? Why go down that path?
I wanted to do it for years.
Why?
I love listening to podcasts. I was listening to Adam Carolla's podcast when he was starting out, and Bill Simmons. I loved consuming media that way. I loved on-demand media that I could get whenever I wanted to. Everyone knows why podcasts are great. And a couple years ago, as we were launching Recode, I said, this is a good time for us to try to do this. We had a false start. We went to talk to Bob Pittman about, should we, what do you think of this podcasting idea? He said, don't do it, do radio. So we did.
Why would he say that?
I can't imagine why he would say that. So we did this terrible test show in San Francisco on Sunday night. And it sounded like
That's a great night for shows,
sounded
right,
like
gang?
and it sounded like bad radio.
That's where everybody puts their best shows, Sunday night.
It was great. And it was everything that we do poorly, sort of in 1 hour. And so we stopped that. And now we're doing what we do well, which is we talk to people. We have great access. We know how to do interviews. It maps 100% to podcasts. One day we're going to try to do other stuff that's not a straight interview, but that is what we are strongest at. And so it's been really fairly easy for Kara and myself to sort of move into podcasting. If you can do it on stage, you should be able to do it in a studio.
What is the unique, from your perspective as a podcast host, what is the power of audio to you? I mean, what does that mean to you?
I love the intimacy, both the actual conversation, and this is pretty intimate, but when you remove the audience, it gets even more intimate, and then also obviously as a listener, right? It's in your head. And I love that, and I love that it also gives you the option you can consume this while you are en route, while you're working out, while you're doing, so it allows you to multitask, but it still commands your attention, which is a pretty cool trick, in a way that video doesn't, right? You have to watch the video.
Right. There seems to be an unending appetite for scale in digital. Everyone wants to, there's no such thing as big enough. You talked about the investment rounds, as there's no such thing as too high. The same is true of reach, the same is true of scale. What does that mean when everyone's chasing BuzzFeed-style numbers and ultimately only BuzzFeed can achieve them?
Yeah,
what does that mean for other media?
ultimately,
what does it mean for other media companies?
Ultimately, it's Facebook, right?
Facebook.
Facebook, my employer, Vox Media, is in chasing scale, which means going to where your audience is, which means they're on Facebook, maybe they're on Snapchat, maybe they're on Google. It means that you are really at the mercy of a handful of big platforms and distributors. That's not a new idea. I'm old enough to remember when Yahoo was a big deal, and if you were in web publishing, the main job was to get on the homepage of Yahoo, and they would send you traffic. And prior to that, it was AOL. And then for a long time, everyone who was doing web publishing had built a business around Google. And now it has shifted to Facebook. The big question for us is, does Facebook get supplanted by something else? History suggests yes. On the other hand, Facebook is at a scale that we've never seen before. It's 1.6 billion people. Using it worldwide, and so maybe it doesn't get supplanted. But either way, we have to spend a lot of time trying to figure out how can we get our stuff distributed via Facebook and other platforms.
You and a lot of other publishers are in the same boat there. You talk to a lot of those other publishers. How are people dealing with this perceived conflict of the more I depend on Facebook, the more I'm dependent on Facebook?
Right. So this was a big debate a year and a half ago. Maybe we shouldn't be in the business of giving all our stuff to Facebook and publishing our stuff on Facebook and depending on Facebook for monetization because really we're going to be at their mercy. That debate's over. We're just doing it.
That's true generally, right?
Yeah, and so broadly, everyone has moved towards that idea. There's no longer debate about it, and we all know we're on a roller coaster and it's going to move around. And the hope is it's better than standing still. I talked to a BuzzFeed investor because there was a question about BuzzFeed had to lower its revenue estimates, and I want to get the quote right. This was an investor who said they're driving 60 miles an hour in the dark without their headlights on. He said, but that's better than them not driving, so I'll take it.
You had a guest on your podcast, Hunter Walk, co-founder of Homebrew. And he argued that podcasts should not be free, that they should be available by subscription. Is it too late for that? And will listeners even pay for? Will they even pay for content the way or viewers to video do?
No, I don't think it's too late to sell podcasts. I think it might be too early.
Tell me, what do you mean?
I think you need to get a lot more people interested in the idea of podcasts. I think it's a pretty small audience right now. And then at some point you can say, here's a free version, here's a premium version. People will pay for stuff. People pay $10. There's 50 million people paying for Netflix in this country. There's lots of paid subscription services out there that work. You just need to deliver value. And so I think we will have a paid tier of podcasting at some point.
As part of that conversation, Hunter also argued that the term podcasting was part of the problem, the whole kind of Apple ecosystem, the association with Apple.
Hunter is very smart, but I disagree. I want
to hear about it.
I think podcasting as a name is fine. Everyone can figure it out. Again, the notion that Apple, again in this case, is such a dominant distributor is a problem. If you're hopeful, you say, well, it's a relatively small audience. Most people aren't getting podcasts at all, so maybe they will start getting them through Amazon or Google or other places. I'm not that hung up on it. I mean, I think, again, you guys all know the reason that Apple is a problem on the ad side. I think this stuff gets resolved over time. I think the bigger problem is who's going to make stuff that people want to listen to, and the rest of it sorts itself out.
Are you surprised, or do you think it's just a process of evolution that there aren't more people even now consuming on-demand audio content, just as there are on-demand video content? Someone's
got to show you, hey, there's this thing. I'm going to put it on your phone for you, and this is how you're going to consume it. And until they do that, you don't know that it exists. Or you read about cereal, and then you go and spend time trying to figure out how to get it from iTunes. It's not very difficult. Everyone's on a computer. Everyone can Google. But until someone says, I'm listening to this thing, it's great, you got to try it, you're not going to do it.
So you're saying it's an awareness and a word-of-mouth problem primarily?
Yeah.
That leads to my last question, which is more important, the quality of the content or the quality of the distribution?
What's the content? You cannot make someone watch or listen to something they don't want to watch or listen. Ever. Yeah, so you could, right? In the old days you could. You had 3 channels, you watched whatever was on. There are still networks based on that idea that someone doesn't have a remote and they're unable to change the channel. But my kids are 7.5 and 6. They've lived entirely in an on-demand world. When we're reading a book to them, they say, pause the book. They've never heard an audio ad, right? They've only listened to Spotify. Occasionally I'll have I'll be watching something and they'll see an ad and they'll ask me what that thing is because they've never seen an ad. So somewhere between them and where we are now is where we're going, right? It's going to be an on-demand world. You get what you want. The idea of having to wait for it goes away. So the question is, what do you want?
So what does that mean for the people in the business of linear audio content now, the broadcast business, what does it mean for media brands like that?
Well, if your timeline is 5 years or less, great, because you're making a lot of money. You're going to keep making a lot of money. If you want to build something that's going to be around in 10 years or 15 years, it's terrifying. It's not a coincidence that most people running the big networks are in their late 50s or early 60s and aren't going to be around to steer these businesses in 10 years. I mean, you're seeing a version of this with Viacom, where everyone's focused on the gory parts of the Sumner Redstone story. But the real story is that they haven't moved that business for 10 years. They've operated as if nothing's changing. So whoever runs Viacom in a month or 2 months is going to have this collection of assets that has just been unchanged during this entire digital revolution.
Based on the people that you've talked to over the years, do you get a sense of what happens in 5 years to these big broadcast companies? I mean, what are the strategies that they need to employ based on the people you've talked to? Do you have any hints?
Oh no, they're just hoping that it all goes away.
I know. I'm asking what they should do.
If you would try to disrupt yourself, right? But no one ever wants to do this. I mean, the music business is still selling CDs. Half of their sales are still coming from CD sales. It is very hard to actually go ahead and say, we're going to blow up our business model. We're going to take a hit this year and next year as we completely rethink the way we do business. No one really wants to do that for obvious reasons.
And yet if they don't?
If they don't, they usually still get paid really well until they hand the job off to somebody else. I mean, the flip side of this, right, is the disruptors, the Napsters of the world, generally make much less money than the companies they're blowing up. So they destroy a lot of market value. They destroy companies. I think, like we were talking about at the beginning of this conversation, the money doesn't sort of pass on to them necessarily. It's an interesting story.
Everybody should listen to Peter Kafka's amazing, wonderful podcast on Recode. Recode is a super destination, and the Code conferences are awesome as well. Thank you, Peter Kafka, for being here. Thank you.